Good morning. We're excited to host four wonderful leaders in this industry, and we'll get the discussion underway in just a minute. And what I'd like to do is to frame the discussion with a half a dozen topics about what we might talk about as the travel value chain. Economic recovery, well, in some parts, yes, in some parts, no. We'll talk about that. And juxtapose that with technology 3.0, what we might look at in that regard. Billion-dollar deals going on for tech companies. Is there a bubble in that world? Yet Groupon is at what, $4 to $5 billion in revenue. Yes, real revenue. We'll talk about some of these things. Global forces at play, supplier consolidation, distribution battles, commercial battles, yes. Legal battles, yes. Product unbundling and merchandising fees, and what that means, especially to you buyers in the audience, what a major issue. So what I'd like to do here for just a couple minutes to get us warmed up is to look at each one of these areas, what we'll be talking about, and give you a couple examples of what's being said in the marketplace and what leaders in the GDS world, in the airline world are saying. So airlines, hotels, GDSs, travel agencies, and buyers. Here we go, just a couple of quick comments. Merchandising is a big part of our revenue strategy going forward. Check out this next one. The word control is used multiple times. This is from an airline CEO. Much of what we are doing is making sure that we control our brand, control our distribution. Much is the same as other consumer product companies. We want to control the packaging of our brand and control the distribution of our brand. Those are clear signals about the desire here at play. Aggregators sell our least valued inventory at our most expensive distribution cost. You don't think of us as an internet company, but we're big internet companies. Airline thoughts. Hotels. Products are increasingly commoditized, a gray mass in a sea of sameness. 254 buyers estimated that 68% of hotel bookings complied with preferred lodging vendors and policies, the lowest compliance figure among 8 travel vendor categories. The bane of many of your existences. How do we get a hotel program that sticks, and how do we use it or not? As many as 70% are not in the GDS. That's obviously part of the problem. Okay, check this out. There's a comment, yep, in our wonderful friendly beat. While Hipmunk is not corporate travel focused, it's gaining strength among small businesses and such travelers as consultants who have frequent but erratic travel itineraries. Hipmunk, have you heard of Hipmunk? Yes, some of you have. Well, your travelers are using it. Your travelers are checking it out just like they did Kayak 3 years ago. And this is something where you need to be familiar with. This is a company that's up and coming, funded by many of the former Expedia stars. So here we go again. We'll see things like this continue to emerge. GDSs. Love this. The airline CEO says, or this is actually a GDS filing about the airline business, their walled garden environment or direct connect strategy adds needless complexity. We have enormous revenue at risk. We're trying to break some of these monopolistic practices, the airline CEO says of the GDSs. We've heard that airlines suggested to some agencies they should go to the GDS to sign a reverse GDS agreement. Well, maybe we'll talk today about what is a reverse GDS agreement. I'm not sure what that is, but I'd love to hear what that is. We'll talk about that. This is really, okay, this is cultural. Here's this last one. It's important to note that we've been down this road before. Okay, great, that's terrific. Let's go down it again. Here we go to the next one. Travel agencies. There's a new breed of third-party aggregators. What are these aggregators that don't require GDS interaction? Agencies are concentrating on improving their hotel content. Yep, trying to fill the holes. The next one's interesting. So if the content were to fall out of the GDS, the corporate portal would provide corporations with access to negotiated fares and other content if they fall out of the GDS. This is a corporate portal provided by an airline on the airline's website. And that's obviously a major issue if you're a TMC. What does that mean to you? Scale has proven to be a major advantage. Why? We'll talk about that. Now, lastly, and here we go, and we'll get the protagonist on the stage. From a buyer perspective, Those of you who are buyers, you sit at the head of the table, you spend the money, you procure the travel. The inability of travelers to complete their travel arrangements through the managed process is encouraging them to switch to unmanaged channels. Consumer behavior. They're going to go where it makes sense for them. Non-base fare items in the short term and medium term will raise travel costs by 10.4%. That's material. Other hand here, there is significant opportunity for corporations to leverage the ancillary services movement to improve their overall relationship with travel suppliers. I think many of you would have some opinions on that. How can we improve that based on these new charges? More charges. The credit card surcharge increase costs up to 2.5%. We are more than astonished about this step. This is referring to an airline that happens to be based in Germany that's going to charge back for the airline merchant fee. Okay, I don't want to do that, so I'll just send an invoice, right? I'll just do it through invoicing, supplier-buyer relationship. Well, several travel management companies announced surcharges for clients paying by invoice. So I'm not going to get away from this payment surcharge if I'm a buyer. Okay, with that, that's the warm-up. These are the types of topics we'll get into, and I'm really excited to do something we did last year in this panel. This is the mystery panelist. One of our panelists is this person. This is a very unique job that this person had at some point in his career. Your job over the next few minutes, let's call it the next half an hour or so, is to think, okay, who is this and what is he doing? And then we'll come back at the end and reveal who is this mystery panelist and what, in fact, is he doing. All right, so with that, let's introduce our panelists and bring him on stage. Let's start with the CEO of Republic Airways and Frontier Airlines, Brian Bedford. Welcome, Brian. Welcome. We'll take that chair, the second chair there. All right, let's go to the next one. President and Chief Executive Officer of Expedia Inc., the holding company of all the brands, Mr. Dara Khosrowshahi. Welcome, Dara.
Thank you.
Right there in the middle for Dara. Mr. Gordon Wilson, the President and CEO of Travelport. Welcome. And lastly, Mr. Jan Freitag, who's the Senior Vice President of Global Development for STR, many of you know as the global leader in hotel data and research. Jan, welcome. Excellent. Welcome, gentlemen. What we'd like to start with is a discussion about outlook. It's hard to get through the day without feeling queasy at some point about the economy or the global outlook. And let's talk about the outlook for the travel industry and for the economy. And we've got multiple perspectives here. Gordon, I might start with you. Sure. Given the multiple businesses in multiple continents, and what are you seeing from a business performance perspective, and where do you think things go?
We saw a relatively strong first half of the year in terms of overall transactions, but a mixed bag in terms of the global dynamic. So actually the US market from a transactional perspective was down year over year. However, other parts of the world are up, and some parts of the world are up quite a lot. Brazil was up about 30%, Russia was up 20%, South Africa up 19%, India up 11%, Australia up 11% as well. And you've got a mixed bag within various regions too. So it's very interesting if you look at Western Europe. In the first 6 months of the year, all of the growth, or 77% of all the growth from a GDS perspective in Western Europe was in two countries/regions, i.e. Germany and Scandinavia. The UK was basically flat, Italy was flat, rest of Europe was flat too. So actually as you go into the looking forward, the fact that both France and Germany have gone to virtually zero GDP growth is a bit of a concern. So I think going forward, the kind of outlook for Europe is that kind of quite a long L-shaped that Martin Sorrell of WPP talks about, with a little tick at the end, which hopefully will happen. Hopefully America is a U-shape, so it'll kind of come back. It's a bit bouncing around the bottom at the moment, and there'll be no double dip. And then the emerging markets have done a V.
So the emerging markets are up and out.
Yeah, and long may that continue. Although even today's press, there's some talk about some slowdown in India and China. So we're being vigilant, but we're still pretty bullish about the emerging market growth.
Dara, to you, from a distributor, aggregator, online agency perspective, and media company for that matter, and what you do, what are you guys seeing?
We're seeing pretty broad strength. Now, we have the advantage of having internet adoption being a further fuel behind us. In the last quarter, for example, that we announced to the street, we saw domestic revenue growth of 10%, which is pretty good. Yeah. But most of the growth that we've seen is in international markets where the revenue growth was 45%. The weakness of the dollar helps. Yeah. But as Gordon said, the Far East are huge economic growth engines that are starting to participate in a larger way in our pie. South America is great, and I'd say the U.S. is decent. Travelers haven't stopped traveling. I worry a bit about the economic news in the stock market, et cetera, and what's going to happen in the second half. So to the extent that the second half holds up anywhere close to the first half did, I declare that a success. Yeah. But that's a game that's yet to be played out.
Can you distinguish a little bit between, so growth for Expedia maybe as compared to what you see from a market perspective? So you go into an emerging market and you have a lot of adoption because you're growing the company. And maybe help from your perspective, is that market growth, or is that just because you're a good player and you're taking share from others?
You know, in the emerging markets, it is much more about our coming in there. We're a new player. We spend very aggressively on marketing, usually at a loss for a good 2-3 years when we go into these emerging markets. So our growth is not really reflective of general market growth. Right. One sign that we look for in the markets is pricing. And for example, in the lodging marketplace, one good sign that we're seeing for suppliers is that ADRs actually have firmed up in the first half of the year pretty nicely. And it looks like the second half will be decent as far as ADRs go. And that to us is more of an indicator of what demand is on the overall market.
Well, that's a perfect cue for Jan. All right, let's talk about ADRs for a minute. What are you seeing in the marketplace, and what do you think is going to happen?
So the big three topics for the U.S. hotel industry are basically supply, demand, and ADR growth, as Dara just said. On the supply side, the good news for the existing hotels is there just isn't any really new supply out there. There just isn't any money out there to build. We're seeing very, very strong demand growth, around 5% or so for the first 7 months of this year, which then gives you really strong base level of occupancy, which drives ADR. So far, year to date, call it around 3.5% or so. And hopefully we're going to think that for the rest of the year, we're going to see something similar as in that kind of general ballpark, you know, call it 3.5–4%.
So if you can say that maybe a couple of years ago, we were hoping, if you put the buyer's hat on for a second, that we were seeing a buyer's market maybe come around the corner. Are we there still, or are we?
You did, and I hope you enjoyed it while it lasted. You know? I think with the lack of new supply into the markets, I think you're going to see the balance of power shift a little bit. And I hope what we had said in our presentations for the last couple of years is these are obviously long-term relationships. Whenever I present at GBTA, I say, you know, this is not about beating somebody up for the next 6 months. It's about building the relationship that gets you through the buyer's market and then through the seller's market as well. So hopefully, you know, you build those relationships through 2012 and 13.
All right, so we'll take that one step further. So here we are, we're about the end of August. You have many of these corporate travel managers, and let's say after our U.S. Labor Day holiday, we go into probably a budgeting season, you know, if you're on a calendar fiscal year, so it's here. What do we think about rate for next year? What if you were building a budget for, let's say, a modest size or a large size corporate travel program, what would you say the assumption for rate should be?
Which luckily I don't have to, so I just tell you what our forecast is based on our macroeconomic crystal ball. What we had suggested at the NYU Investment Conference, which is in June, we suggested that the 2012 ADR% change would be 6%. We just revised that down to 4.9, which in our world is a huge revision downward. So yes, there's going to be ADR growth, and your mileage may vary. Obviously, I was just presenting at the Virtuoso Travel Mart in Vegas, and luxury travel is just rock and roll. You know, there's just a lot of demand for the highest end of the market. So those ADR changes are going to be probably double digit, you know, because you're looking at very, very tight supply. So call that 5 on average, and then your miles may vary on whatever segment you're playing in.
let's stick with hotels for just a minute, because those of you that follow Expedia, it's been an incredible story over the years for all the obvious reasons. One of the key things that is really fascinating about the Expedia family of companies and sites is the focus on hotels. Hotel content in reviews with TripAdvisor and the like, and hotel content in terms of rate and inventory. And Dora, if I've got it right, really in excess of 60% of the overall revenue for Expedia comes from the hotel business.
That's correct.
Is that right?
That's correct.
And so as you look at this next few quarters or next year, obviously you're looking at the hotel business and maybe what you're seeing from a demand perspective and how you might play there.
You know, the demand in general is pretty healthy, and leisure demand has held up, and obviously corporate demand has been a very nice lift going into this year. And while it appears that our corporate buyers, through Agencia, we get a pretty good view of corporate buyers, they're being a little tighter and trying to tighten up on making sure that travelers follow policy, et cetera. We haven't seen any kind of broad pullback on corporate demand as of yet. Okay. So I think for hoteliers, you've got a decent leisure demand coming in. You've got strong corporate demand. I think the big issue is the groups business. And whereas historically the groups business was very long dated, yeah, you could really fill in some of your hotel for a year in advance, the hoteliers are seeing much more short dated groups business. And I think that there is some worry creeping in there that some of that groups business that they thought was going to be there going to Q4, for example, may not be, or the attendance may not be as strong as they thought. And I think that, to me, is going to be a pretty determining factor in Q4. And I would say, on average, whereas we saw hoteliers quite confident in the first half of the year, they're a little bit less confident about the second half of the year. But I do think that they've got the tools to adjust.
Gotcha. All right, let's switch gears to the airline business and talk about outlook. Brian, you've got an incredible success story yourself, and being really a world-renowned leader in the regional airline business, and now running as well Frontier as a part of your holding company and your group. What do you guys see?
Well, what we've seen over the last 6 months is very robust demand. We haven't had any difficulty filling up aircraft. For those of you who fly, planes have been very full. Prices, our customers have been price sensitive. Absolutely, we do see changes in buying travel habits, longer dated, frankly. We're seeing people that are price sensitive enough to actually plan travel further in advance to take advantage of AP fares. So, but as an industry, we've obviously had more success in the hotel businesses moving prices up. TRASM's up, double digits, low double digits, 10 to 12%. But that's done out of necessity, because we're looking at 30 to 40% increases in our largest input cost, which is fuel. And just some relative scale, for a business the size of Frontier, we've seen fuel costs go from $600 million a year to $800 million a year. And that's on a $1.6 billion business. So those are pretty phenomenal increases in input costs that simply have to be passed on to consumers. So there is a necessity to drive revenue higher, and what you'll see happen in the balance of the year is a continued reduction of supply. So there will be some supply constraints within the domestic industry, and again focused on trying to cover the increased cost of fuel. Just general macroeconomic outlook, I think the one thing that everybody in this room suffers with is the continued barrage of negative headlines. Yeah. We continue to see GDP downward revisions, consumer confidence downward revisions. So I will tell you, we haven't seen that materialize in our bookings. We continue to see increases in year-over-year bookings and at higher average fares, but there's this sort of holding our breath, waiting for that shoe to fall. That when does demand start to show some lack of resiliency? Yep.
So let's take the conversation down one level and talk about distribution. As we saw in one of the quotations from an airline CEO, it was not Brian, and the use of the word control 4 or 5 times in a couple of sentences. But Brian, why don't we keep going and have you start us off on the topic of distribution and in the spirit of the travel value chain, how our products and services are distributed, how they're bought and sold. We've got a lot of different opinions here about distribution and the value of certain elements of it. Do you want to give us a first shot at that?
I'd be happy to. Well, first of all, I believe there's value in all parts of the supply chain. You could argue that customers, while they need us, they need to fly, it's relevant to their business, it's relevant to their personal travel needs, there isn't a lot of trust. People don't understand how airlines price tickets. I wish I could explain it to you. I don't understand it either. But so due to the lack of trust, I think that most consumers have in airlines, they find the independent shops, whether they're OTAs or aggregators, as a check and balance on whether they're getting the best information and the best deal. So there's clearly value there. I think the root of the problem that we have, obviously, there's a cost element here. But even more importantly, there's the who owns the customer element, and no offense to my friends at Expedia, but so they'll sell a ticket on Frontier, and that's fine. If we didn't value the relationship, we wouldn't make the content available through their channel. But once it actually is booked, if there's a change or a problem, we get stuck servicing the customer. And we should, because we think of them as our customer, but they're really not. We don't own that relationship. We'd like to at some point, but we don't. And so there are some tensions, I think, around the product service aspects of the relationships, as well as tensions around the economic value added.
That's for sure. Dora, I guess he's given you a chance to respond.
Well, actually, they call us, and we take care of most of the problems. But I think, other than that, one of the issues when you talked about the quote, which is control, when we think about the environment, we think about the customer, right? In the end, we're all trying to sell product to customers, and to the extent that you want to have a great product that customers love, you have to provide them with what they want, and our customers want simplicity, clarity, right? They want to know, I'm going from X to Y, what's the price, how can I get there, what are the levels of service, what are the trade-offs that I can make between price and the quality of service or timing, et cetera. Corporate travelers, want to know, is it within policy, et cetera. And there is a bit of a battle between control, which is airlines wanting to sell the product the way that they want to sell it, but then being able to present that product in an easy to understand way for the mass of consumers out there. And I think if somehow we can achieve both, I think Gordon, for example, the GDSs are keys to that, translating, product for the airlines as to how they want to sell it into something that's easy to understand for consumers. I think there's a win there. I think there's a way that we can get there through technology, through innovation, and hopefully we can get from a mode of, lawsuits to actually solving the problem together.
Okay, speaking of lawsuits, no, it's true. I mean, we obviously have that tension, which is commercial and legal, and we will not go into the legal dynamics, Gordon. That's just not where we'll go today. The GDS environment, as well as the family of products and services and sites and businesses that is Travelport, your perspective on distribution and the collaboration, obviously, with, let's say, a major distributor, a major supplier, and for years, the GDSs have been the enablers. I mean, that's how we actually enabled a transaction to happen. And the availability, the rates, and the access to that information as an information services provider. Where does it go? Where do you go from here in terms of distribution?
Well, I mean, like any business, it evolves. And, to the points that Dara made, I mean, my role in life is effectively to enable an airline or a hotel or a car rental company or whatever to distribute their product as widely as possible in the manner they want it to be distributed. There's no question of that. But I also have to, deal with the fact that the end user of that service, through a travel agency or a TMC or a corporate, booking tool, wants to see options and wants to see choices. And that's the mainstay of what we do. Now, the way that airlines are seeking to sell their product is changing. Therefore, our technology has had to change. And the newsflash here is the technology has changed. Some airline CEOs maybe not quite aware of that yet, and some are enlightened, and some are not enlightened. And I have a 4-year-old daughter, and we have a rule in our house, which is you can't say you don't like something until you've tried it on her plate. So I don't like broccoli, Daddy.
It's called the no thank you bite.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? They have to take a no thank you bite.
So, so she doesn't like broccoli, she tries broccoli, now she loves broccoli. Well, airline CEOs, try the broccoli, because actually the technology is there if you want to use it. And my friend here on my right, Frontier Airlines, has just signed an agreement to put their stretch seating, their fares families, all of their content available through the GDS, which means it can go into the TMCs, it can go into the corporate booking tools,
I do like broccoli.
You do like broccoli, there we are. And we might try on beans next.
What do they cost?
Okay, Gordon, help us out. Speaking of trying things out, trying something new, what is this statement or this reference to a reverse GDS model? Help us. What does that mean commercially?
I mean, that's purely an attempt, and this is the real news, which is going on in the dialogue. It's not a technology dialogue. The technology is there, and the best thing to do is for the parties to work together to make the technology work. That would be the best service we collectively could give to the corporate travel and the corporate travel managers. The issue is about the economic flows, and there are people here who think that basically GDSs shouldn't pay anything to travel agencies, that GDSs should just get paid by airlines, and airlines should pay travel agencies. And that is a model. And if that's the way the market progresses and wants to move to, then we will progressively move to that kind of model. But be careful here, because any travel agency knows that one day airlines say, yeah, we're going to see you whole and everything will be fine, and you're good for maybe 6 months to a year, and then kaboom, it disappears in terms of revenue. Agencies provide an important service. They need to make a profit. They do a great service for the airlines at a fairly low cost of distribution in the aggregate compared to any other industry. And actually, I think that the commercial model serves people well. Can we change it? Of course we can. But it has to be a triangle, of agreement, as opposed to one party trying to force a change on the other two parts of the triangle.
Yeah. So if we look, okay, the triangle has 3 points, but maybe in the middle of that triangle is the buyer. Right? Because if you've got the supplier, the GDS, and the travel agency, the buyer sitting in the middle, where do you think these economics go with respect to the buyer? If we looked out a year or two from now, is it a fee-for-service business, just like the buyers went through the transition with the travel agency community over the past 10 or 15 years? It's a fee-for-service business now. Would the GDS business ultimately be a fee-for-service business that the buyers are paying for in a fair model? But is that a potential model that we could see?
No, I don't really think that's the way the market's going to go, because I think the GDSs provide an extraordinarily valuable service to the supplier community, airlines, car rental, hotels. We can argue till the cows come home whether the right price point, etc. But for an airline or anybody else to claim there is no value in that and they shouldn't pay anything for it is a complete and utter nonsense. We rack their products, on agency screens in 160 countries around the world, 365 days of the year. They only pay when they get a booking, give or take a couple of no-shows, But they only pay when they get a booking. They pay us less than they pay Google for that kind of distribution. Come on, let's get real about who should pay who.
Okay, there you have it. Getting fired up. Switching gears a bit to talk about hotel distribution for a minute, because I think striking differences in the industry dynamics of the airline marketplace, the number of suppliers, and the distribution sort of methods and technologies to hotel distribution. And if we had that venerable Michael Porter of Harvard Business School talking about the 5 forces in strategy and the leverage in the marketplace, we'd see very different assessments of the airline marketplace vis-a-vis the hotel marketplace, because the hotel marketplace is so fragmented. We see in some cases 20% of the hotels in the GDS environment, and that makes things very difficult. So where do you think things go with respect to if you're a hotelier, the distribution costs for you, what are you trying to do? We've seen this control. Control is a euphemism for sell directly from the airline CEO, right? I want to control this. I want to sell more on my website. If you're a hotelier, what does that mean?
Obviously, Brad.com is your cheapest channel and has much eyeballs and clicks you can direct to that channel, that's what you want.
So when you say brand.com, you're saying your own brand, if
Yeah.
you are Marriott.com or so
Correct.
forth.
That's ultimately, what your most cost-effective channel is, and everything else after that is more expensive. The question is just by what degree. You're charging a fair fee for your business. Groupon charges what they think is a fair fee for their business. A whole lot of other people are trying to get your travelers to their eyeballs, and getting the travelers' eyeballs to their site. And then the question is, how much are they charging to hand that customer over? Where I think that is going, I think the hotels are making a very, very concerted effort, to allow you in the business, what you said, for the first sale, and then ultimately say, well, now I really would like to have a little bit more of that customer, especially on the corporate side. But that said, as long as your corporate traveler is saying, no, I'd rather book with a third party, the brands haven't done their job of making the booking process easy.
I think so if we sensed Gordon's passion right there just a minute or so ago, and if you were to walk into the office of a general manager at a local property level and strike up a conversation about distribution and sales of his or her hotel rooms there, and you get onto the topic and start to mention names like Priceline or Hotels.com, the body language changes. And Dora, why does that body language change? Why do they feel anxious when they start talking about?
I thought you were going to say they come and hug you, when they talk about, wow, this is going in a different direction than I thought. I think we are relatively new companies, new entrants in the marketplace, and growing very quickly as far as distribution goes. The fact is, you do have to go back to the customer, okay? And for the leisure traveler, for the corporate traveler, we provide, as OTAs, an incredible array of product and content that was not available previously. And as a result, we attract users, and as a result, we bring lots and lots of traffic to hoteliers, either through our channel, but also a lot of these users are using our website to shop and then go direct to the hotels as well.
Yeah.
So there's a billboard effect that has been demonstrated that's quite significant. I think one of the interesting changes that's going to come in the hotel business, you talked about the fragmentation of the hotel business, is that we see going forward an increasing fragmentation of distribution choices and complexity for hotels. Okay, it's not going to be brand.com and then my relationship with OTAs. It'll be brand.com, relationship with OTAs, relationship with Google, relationship with TripAdvisor, relationship with Groupon. What kind of channels do I want to be in? Do I want to be in a mobile channel? And tons of differentiation as far as how you can price to whom. We can now offer a hotelier, for example, well, if you don't want to drop your price, if you're having trouble during a certain period, you don't want to drop your rates in the US, we can put a sale on for travelers just coming from Asia. And no one in the US is going to see that rate. So there's a ton of complexity and choice coming up for hoteliers. The great news is that if you manage your reviews well, if you manage your product well, you put pictures up, descriptions, etc., I think hoteliers have a ton of tools to be able to display their product more attractively online and as a result push their ADRs up, etc., and really aggressively manage the online channel, both on the leisure side and on the corporate side.
This is a significant sea change. The skill sets, even at the property level, to handle these types of activities and a couple of staff positions and an understanding of it, and those that do understand it really do perform well in these marketplaces, and they're actually adjusting rate by the minute, by the half hour, by the hour, and moving things around. It is a very dramatic change in distribution, and I think the companies that Doris mentioned are right in there. That's when we look at the effect of these new entrants, some of us might think that, okay, well, the internet thing was here, that's sort of old news. Well, we are looking at whatever you want to call it, a 3.0, a 4.0 effect, and let's use that as a transition. Go ahead, Jan.
But from a travel buyer perspective, obviously, there was this collective shudder I saw when Dara mentioned that there are rates out there that you don't see on the US website that are maybe on the Asia website, right? So how do you manage that? That's going to be an interesting point to negotiate when you're going forward.
Or how do you take advantage of it? Right? I think for the travel buyer, the choices are going to be extraordinary. Do you want to ally yourself with a brand on a national level? There are lots of independents looking for business. Can you take advantage of that? There's going to be a lot of complexity out there, but with that comes opportunity.
Yeah. It seems like almost flexibility might pay for pay dividends, I should say, for buyers as they're trying to manage their programs. Let's talk about the effect of companies like Google, Groupon on travel distribution and what we're seeing. Maybe, Brian, get us started. What do you see from your perspective?
Well, there's a lot of experimentation going on right now. People want to understand what this new channel looks like, and can it actually change travel habits or buying patterns. So I think it's embryonic, but there is experimentation going on, and I think airlines are open to it. In general, not to come back to this control thing, because I disagree that it's about control. If we had a business model that could grow the pie, focus on growing the pie, and then there was a fair allocation of that, I mean, true value creation, you'd find airlines embrace that wholeheartedly. So if there are people who aren't traveling today, and there was some way to, make them aware that there are deals out there that bring new people into the travel profile, that's the sweet spot we're all looking for. But if we get to the point where we're arguing about, commoditizing travel to such a degree that it's not profitable, I think the risk becomes people remove content from these channels. And we're sort of right back to where we were, before the introduction of the aggregator model. And if we can't make money on those channels, we'll withdraw the content, and is that really ultimately good? So again, I think there's a fine tuning that continues. It has to evolve. It has to evolve in a way that's fair for all the parties involved in the travel mix. I think we all want, the level of, I think we all want the level of transparency that aggregators can bring to the marketplace, and whether that comes through more nuanced sales channels that are more targeted, whether it's geographically targeted or whether it's a customer segment target. If that's what Groupon brings, I think you'll continue to see people experiment with it.
So a major player in airline, let's say rate display, let's just call it that, fare display, would be ITA. And Google buys ITA for a big number. And we're kind of seeing, okay, where does this go? What does this mean? So from an airline perspective, you watch that. What do you think when you see something like that go on?
Well, again, Tripp, I mean, it comes down to the airlines to be disciplined enough about what channels they use. I think Dara was absolutely right. We have to figure out where value channels, drive, sensible business activity, and then, we'll fish in those streams. If Google can bring a model to us that makes sense, then we should be open to using it. And if they can't, then we shouldn't give them access to the content. But the airlines really struggle with the fulfillment application of what's going on through these disintermediated channels. We know the price of what's being sold. We're not actually sure what the promise is. So delivering on the promise and fulfilling the promise becomes harder and harder. This is the challenge that we've tried to partner with Travelport on, to make sure that when we're having a conversation with customers, they're seeing the full array of not just services that are provided, but they really understand what the economics associated with the acquisition is, so that when they do get to the actual fulfillment side, they get what they pay for, and they're happy about the value they got.
Gordon, going to pick it up from there. When you see these major players in these deals, what does it mean from your perspective?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, at the one level, I'm a B2B company, so I'm not, I'm not going to be in Groupon, etc. But obviously, I would benefit, as Dara and companies like Dara's participate in Groupon and drive more transactions through the GDS system. But I think, to Brian's point, at the moment, this is just adding. And it's just a dynamic of the world. There are just more and more channels being added, whether it's social media, Groupon, or whatever, which is a version of. It's just expanding all the time, which means the complexity is getting greater and greater. So I completely agree with what Brian said. At the end of the day, the channels that work are the channels which deliver more value. In turn, airlines, need to sell more stuff. So they have low lead-in fares, but then they want to try and sell you priority boarding or a seat assignment or whatever else. So make it available in the channels who might buy that stuff, which is what Brian and Air Canada and British Airways and Qantas and United are all doing. And more the merrier, bring it on, and people out there are willing to buy your products and give you more revenue. You know, embrace the technology that's out there to do it.
So you think this, what we've seen in unbundling, so to speak, is really pretty simple? Then it's just, they're just trying to sell the products and services that they have to offer.
Of course, they're going they're going with low lead-in fares and trying to get people to buy up, you know, products, which is only right and proper. Airlines need to make money. The industry needs airlines to make money and to be robust, and we need to help them make money. But it's not rocket science, you know, it's basically, here's a low lead-in fare of $100, but I want to sell you $20 for a seat assignment, X dollars for a priority boarding, and I want as many people as possible to buy those things.
So let's say you're having a private meeting with one of the buyers at a major corporation. Let's say they spend $200 million a year on travel, and it's gone up 10.4% because of these merchandising fees. And they're having a really hard time tracking it and doing the expense reporting. What recommendations would you give to this person that's going into the CFO saying 10.4%, nothing I can do about it, and I can't really track it all, but trust me, we'll take care of it?
Well, if you insist and help to get that content into the tools which your travelers use to book, so A, you can track it. Right? That's one of the big advantages. Get into the corporate booking tool or onto the agency desktop. You can get all the reports you want about what's been purchased, etc., so you can track it. And every travel buyer I talk to, data is the thing that I hear all the time. Yeah. So get it into the tool so you can track it first of all, and then determine your policy, because actually there's some value in that. Right? There's some value in people buying these extra services. You know, your poor, you know, battle-weary, you know, person on the road. You know, is it worth, you know, letting him spend $20 to get a pre-assigned seat, or to get on the aeroplane earlier so they can get their bags into overhead bins? It may well be.
I say yes. The $44 I spent last night to go from row 34 to row 9 into Economy Plus was well worth that $44.
And once you can track it, you can manage it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this really could be a win-win proposition for the industry, in that previous to this unbundling, one of the criticisms of Expedia was, well, you just show timing and price.
Yeah.
Now we have so much more to show. We can show better seating, check bags, etc. We can upsell much more. Our product becomes much more interesting as far as a consumer goes. With Agencia, you can hook that up with policies, etc. And for the airline, they can sell something other than one seat and here's my price. So I think if the industry comes together, it can be a win as far as airliners differentiating their product depending on which consumer that they're looking for. And for travel managers, as opposed to in the old world buying a bundled product, they can, once they track it, they can actually manage it. And I think if we work together on the corporate travel side and on the leisure travel side, it could be a win-win. It really could be.
Well, let's end on that optimistic note. And what I want to do is turn to each of you and ask, as you look out over the next 6 to 12 months, what change in the marketplace for the buyers? Put your buyer hat on and say, what do you think, what's a key change or key dynamic that he or she should really be watching for, and would be really smart to go into that CFO here in this, say, August or September. Watch out for this. This is probably going to happen, and sure enough, it will. What do you think? What do you think a key change? We'll just go right down. We'll do the xylophone. We'll go right down the line here.
I think maybe a takeaway for the travel buyers: book early, book often. You know, you're going to bump into compression in certain markets because the occupancies are so high. So this old ideal for the last 2 years of booking windows being crunched, I think we're going to see an elongation of that.
Yeah, I'd say relative to the discussion that we had, I just say travel buyers have a say in this. And we'd love to hear your voice, and I do think that this can be a win-win for us, and to the extent that we can focus where we're going, I think it can be this unbundling actually could be a win for everybody.
Well, I agree with that. I think that we do need to be respectful of what the travel buyers are suffering with right now, whether it's, you know, simplicity. We've made the product very complicated in terms of unbundling. If bundling works better, if that simplicity is better, you know, we need to understand that and create a product that suits those needs in a very easy to understand and easy to report to the CFO kind of way. And then finally, I would agree, we are heading into a period of time of uncertainty domestically here. Airline responses to that are going to be erring on the side of caution, reducing capacity. Your choices at that point are, do you change the travel policy such that you're requiring people to be more planning oriented in that travel. Again, to the book early comment, in order to get the best deals, because that's still where we're going to see weakness on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, weakness midday. You guys know all the tricks. Those would be more important than ever.
Just to add, I agree with the comments that the panelists have made. I suppose two extra things. One is the rise of mobile. I mean, corporate travelers are going to, demand, having the ability to do what they need to do on mobile-enabled devices, and that's going to be a major part, I think, of the travel policy and management, how that all goes through. And then the second thing, which I think is good news, I think there's going to be much better data, I believe, going forward, because a number of key players in this, like credit card companies, banks, etc., are really, focusing on this area and improving how they can get data through, virtual use credit cards or single use credit cards, etc. And I think a lot of that will help travel buyers who are trying to manage global spend in particular get a much better handle on what's going on and therefore make the right kind of policy decisions. So it's optimistic because I think it is getting a lot better.
Terrific. Now, we have the wonderful opportunity to wrap up our mystery panelist discussion. And let me give you a couple of hints. We'll get back to, okay, there it is. And when you think about Jan, early in his career, yes, he did, in fact, drive a German tank.
That's not it.
That doesn't look like a German tank. Now, Dara, way back when, is a media guy. You'll find him hanging out in Sun Valley at the media confab. And, he's got his roots in the media business and is taking Expedia to new heights in that way. This doesn't look like necessarily, I'm not sure that's going to work. Now, Brian is, in fact, a CPA as well as a licensed pilot, and he has 8 children. So, he's got a lot going on there.
All with the same wife, by the way.
All with the same wife, he adds. He wants to make sure that is very clear.
Thank you.
Gordon has a special degree in law in air and space, right? So maybe there's a partnership with Richard Branson coming in some way in that specialty.
I need to come in handy one day.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, let me give you a little bit more. Look at that. That is, in fact, yes, that is the chute, the poop chute coming out of the back of an airplane. Any guesses? Any guesses? I think it's Brian. In fact, earlier, was it this year, Brian? Was it, or last year?
It was just a year ago, almost to the day.
Just a year ago. He did do the Undercover Boss. This wasn't an early job. This is him.
Thank you. Where did the hair go?
Yeah, lots of fun. You can see the flight attendant, the baggage handler, and the poop shooter. So it was all good. Congratulations. This session is concluded. We welcome you to the general session with Meg Whitman later today. It proves to be a truly exciting session. Thank you very much.